Hello everyone. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Module 3 in our course, Foreign Language Teaching, an online version. The topic for today, and the topic for this week, is the teacher's role in the classroom. During this small, short presentation, I'll be talking a little bit about the role of the teacher, and I'll be talking about the reading you have for this week, and also about setting up a blog, which is your assignment for this week. First of all, these are the learning outcomes for the module. The learning outcomes are to understand the basic elements of the relationship between teacher, student, and the material being taught using the triangle. More on that in a moment. Discuss how different teaching approaches function within the context of the triangle: the passive technician, reflective practitioner, transformative intellectual. Again, we'll be discussing these in more details in a few moments. Discuss how different types of teaching approaches might be more suitable in different teaching contexts, reflecting on your own experience as learners, identifying your teachers among the three general types, which we will talk about in a moment, and also to have your own weblog set up with WordPress. This is the triangle I referred to a moment ago. I don't know who came up with this concept, but it's a very simple one, but a very useful one as well. Basically, in the classroom, as teachers, we have three main elements: you, the teacher, the material being taught, and the students. Now, this seems like a fairly simplistic representation, but if you look more closely, you see that we can do things with this. What happens in the classroom? You, the teacher, teach the material. And the material is learned by the students, who then report back to you, give you feedback to see if they've learned. And if they have, then success. If they haven't, then you teach the material again, it goes to the student. And you see this clockwise cycle. This is a very basic thing. But in fact, much more is happening. As you can see, the teacher has to interrelate, has to communicate with the material. The student has to communicate with the material, and the teacher and the student have to communicate. There's interaction. That's the key. There's interaction here. And this is what's really important, is to look at the interaction. Again, this is fairly basic, but when you think about it, what is the material, and how does it relate to you as a teacher? And how does the student relate to the material? Do they relate to it in the same way? And how important, how relevant is the material for the student? Again, teachers and students interact. Not all students are the same. Not all students learn at the same speed or as well. Not all students want to learn as well. So obviously we have to interact with our students. We have to think about them as individuals, and they have different learning styles, different strategies, different needs, concerns, as do we as teachers. Further, there are other aspects of the triangle we can look at. Now, not only can the teacher interact with the material, but the teacher can interact with how the student interacts with the material. And so I've drawn an arrow going across the triangle to the line which connects the students and the material. As well, I've drawn another line which connects the material to the teacher. Now, there's probably a lot more lines we could draw on here, but just suffice it to say, there's more happening here than simply three things, three materials. There's a lot of interaction. Again, this word interaction is very important because we interact with each other. We also interact with what we're teaching. And beyond that, outside the teacher, you have influences, of course. The teacher is not isolated in a little oval as here, nor is the student, and nor is the material. We live in a context. We live in a world. The material itself is not just the material you're teaching. It's not just the material in the textbook or in the curriculum. It's the whole world. Especially as language teachers, we need to keep in mind, it's very important, we need to keep in mind that what we're teaching and what the students are learning is not just English. It's not just the language we're teaching. It's about life. It's about the world. Okay, so again, think of these three separate elements, but also the influences outside these elements, the community, the world, etc. Now, I've chosen a quote which you'll see in the beginning of the reading, just to start off, and I'll read it very quickly. The experience is the only real reference point teachers share. Experiences of students that influence their views of teaching, experience in professional preparation, experience as members of society. Experience as students. So consider how many hours of your life you spent in the classroom compared to how many hours you spent doing other things. I don't know exactly how many hours we spend as students, but when you think about it, if you go to kindergarten, you start early. Some people start 3 or 4 years old to spend part of the day there, even the whole day in class. Or it's not really class, but it's school. And then as we get older, we're, to 18 years of age, we spent many hours as students sitting in a classroom, and it shapes our experience, it shapes our expectations. It shapes how we think about school. It shapes how we think about learning. It's a major influence in our lives. Compare that to how much time you spend doing other things. Well, you spend a lot of time doing other things. You spend a lot of time sleeping as well. But the time you spend in school, the time you spend in that context is very critical to who we are. And it becomes critical especially if you're a teacher. How about the experience of interacting with your teachers? What does that bring to you as a teacher? You must have role models. I certainly have had role models, especially when I started teaching. And these helped shape who I was as a teacher and who I wanted to be as a teacher. And who I didn't want to be as a teacher, because we don't want to repeat the mistakes of those who came before us. Professional preparation. How much of your training was theoretical? How much was practical? Were you taught how to teach or just about teaching? How often is your teaching critiqued? And by this I mean, are you observed by supervisors, by other people? Do they give you feedback? Do your students give you feedback? Do your peers, other teachers come into the classroom and look at your teaching? Do you critique yourself? What influence does in-service training have on your teaching? In-service training, we talk about pre-service and in-service. Pre-service is the training you receive before you started teaching, and in-service is a continuous professional development that happens afterwards and should continue to happen if you're lucky enough to have access to it. This could be conferences, seminars, workshops, etc. How much has your experience as a teacher, the time you spent preparing for class and in front of your students, improve your teaching? Again, experience. And what has this experience done to you? And does it continue to shape you as a teacher? In the beginning, I'm sure everybody had learned a lot of lessons very quickly when you started teaching, but do you continue to learn? This is the question. Now, as a member of society, and this may not seem so important to you, but I think it is. So take some time to consider it. What does being a member of society have to do with being a teacher? Have you spent much time considering why schools are set up the way they are? There's some very interesting studies done of why schools are arranged why they are, why we have these days, classrooms, students sitting in rows, the schedule is set up the way it is, the exam periods, etc. And this is important to think about why are schools the way they are. They don't necessarily have to be that way, but this is what we come to expect. This is sometimes referred to as a factory model. But we don't have time to go into that now, but it's a very interesting topic, and hopefully later we can come back to it. How much time have you spent reflecting on the role relationship in the classroom, teacher and student? Your role as a teacher versus the role of the student. And remember, all of us as teachers have been students, and we can't forget what it means to a student to be a student, and what the teacher means to the student, and what the role of the teacher is, and what impact this has on your behavior, the behavior of your students, and how you interact with each other, you and the students. Again, interaction. How you teach and how they learn. Is your role only to teach the subject? Or do you have a greater role in shaping your students to be a member of society? Remember, this may not seem your job, but don't forget the students spend a lot of time in class with teachers. So whatever you do is going to have an impact on them. And it's not just what you teach them. Now, the reading this week, Conceptualizing Teaching Acts, is by a writer. He's Indian, as you can see. I think he's from Sri Lanka. His name is, I don't know what his first name is. I've never been able to find out. It's always just B, period. Kumaravadivelu. And because this name, Kumaravadivelu, is very hard for me to say, and probably for you too, I just refer to him as K. It's much easier. In this article, which you can now download, you consider why are teachers important. He considers why are teachers important and what kind of an occupation is teaching. He considers who decides what is taught in the classroom and how this content is delivered, how it is taught. Again, go back to the triangle. He won't talk about the triangle, but I'd like you to think about it as you read. He divides teachers, or types of teaching, into three basic types: the passive technician, the reflective practitioner, and the transformative intellectual. Note that these three types he calls perspectives, and that they're relative tendencies. No one is just a passive technician. No one is just a reflective practitioner. No one is just transformative intellectual. Consider each of these perspectives on the triangle in terms of the material, in terms of the control, the degree of autonomy. And autonomy is a very important word. We're going to be talking about it a lot. So basically, I think you know what autonomy means, but basically it's how much freedom you have to do what you want to do and what you think you should do. And how much are you told what to do? How little autonomy or how much autonomy do you have as a teacher? How much influence do you have over the material and how it's presented? The control, the degree of autonomy the student has over the material and how they learn. Okay? I think you'll agree that, generally speaking, teachers have more autonomy than students. But this might not necessarily be a good thing. Teachers don't have a lot of autonomy as well. I think you're told often what to teach, when to teach, etc. But we'll be talking about these concepts throughout this semester, so we won't go into more detail at the moment. He also talks in the article about the relationship between theory and practice, and between the theorist, the person who comes up with the theory, and the practitioner, you, the teacher. And he looks at the distinction between professional theory and personal theory. Professional theory being what you're told by the theorist, and your own personal theory, what you've developed as a teacher through experience, through looking at different ways of teaching, through talking to colleagues, through going to workshops, through everyday teaching, everyday life, your personality, etc. That's your personal theory, and he talks about these two concepts. He also talks about the perspective of critical pedagogy. Critical pedagogy is a subject all on its own, and we won't talk about it now. He mentions it in the article, and again, in terms of autonomy, it's a very important thing. But I'll let you read about it, and we'll talk about it again some more later. And the teacher's theory of practice. Okay. After you finish reading the article, go back and look at a reflective test. There are reflective tests throughout the article, and they're interesting to look at, and if you have some time, think about. But there's one I'd like you to pay attention to, and it's 1.5. You'll find it on page 21 of the reading. And this is what I want you to consider. What are the benefits, and who stands to benefit if teachers become effective producers of their own personal theories? What, in your specific learning and teaching context, are the possibilities and limitations you face if you wish to theorize from your practice? I think these questions will make more sense to you after you read the material, but I'd like you to, as you're reading, think about it, and after you finish, think about it some more. And hopefully, when you do your blog entries, maybe you'll touch on this. Again, consider the triangle and the world both inside and outside the classroom. Now, blogging. This is the definition of a blog. I hope you know what blogs are, and if you don't, you should do some research onto them. A website that contains an online personal journal with reflections, comments, and often hyperlinks provided by the writer, also the contents of such site. It's in reverse chronological order. In other words, the most recent entry is what appears first, not the oldest. It often allows readers to comment. The blogs you set up, and I've set up, will allow you to do that. Now, here's the address from my blog. You can also find it, this address, in Libri, and I'll send it to you separately in an email. Now it's your turn. Go create your blog, and after you've created the blog, please send me the link, your address. Do it on WordPress. Send me the link so I can see what you've written. And I will send you further instructions about what to do with blogs later. But first, just set it up. There are several tutorials on Libri. I'll send you the links also in an email. It's going to be coming very soon. To some YouTube videos you can look at. They'll show you how to do this and give you some advice. Now, you may need it, you may not, but just get started. It's fairly intuitive, fairly clear, and it's free. Okay, so I hope that at least by the end of this week, you have your blog set up, and please send me the link, and I'll look forward to reading what you have to say. Now, it's your turn. Thanks very much for listening. I will sign off now, and look forward to hearing from you and to reading your blogs. Bye now.